Today, we're going to have a very serious discussion. I'm going to demonstrate how you can infiltrate any discourse. Now, why is this important? Well, first of all, because it's already happening every time you go online or when you ask a question to an AI chatbot. There are multiple people, marketing specialists, people with political agendas who are always trying to push their ideas at you. So it's important to know how that works so you can develop some sort of immunity against that. Another reason is that I think there is a lot of people who have very interesting things to say, but they cannot get through the noise. So it's important for them to know how to introduce their ideas into a discourse, into a public discourse. So I think it's important for them to know how to introduce their ideas into a public discourse. And I'm going to also demonstrate how it works so that hopefully it will give the necessary tools and knowledge for those who want to spread their ideas that they consider to be important. I will use the tool that I developed that's called Infranodus that visualizes a text as a network. And here on the graph you can actually see an article that I wrote and how it embeds into an existing discourse. So networks is generally a very good way to study how ideas propagate and how they embed into existing structures, because you can visualize them as a graph, almost like a social network, and you can see how your discourse spreads through the already existing one. So that's like a really great way to visualize that. And the approach that we will use will be based on two things. One is that we will study the current Google search results for the query we're interested in. Then we will analyze what LLM GPT-4 produces on the subject that we're interested in. So in this case, it's singularity. Then we'll compare the two graphs, Google search results and the output of an LLM. So that will give us like a general understanding of the discourse that exists both online and inside LLMs. Then we will create a prompt that we will feed to Gemini. We will create an article. We will modify it with some discoveries, for example, focusing on the gaps in the content that we discover. That will enable us to also contribute something new and original to the discourse. And then once we modify this article, we will integrate it back into the discourse and see how well it overlaps with the existing ideas. And that will also help us find some other things that are missing, which we will then add back into the AI, and then finally generate an article that will cover the whole territory of that discourse, and hopefully then we'll make it to the top of Google search results. And I'm going to explain why it's actually going to work. The topic I'm interested in myself is the topic of singularity. In fact, several years ago, I developed the concept of polysingularity. So if you know, singularity is this idea of technological advance reaching a point of no return when technology is so developed that we enter into a new era of consciousness where we merge with machines and we don't know what's going to happen. So it's a little bit prophetic and apocalyptic at the same time. I feel it's also like a single point, and this is why I developed the concept of polysingularity, because I was more interested to think how we can develop a system that's polysingular, that has multiple truths, that ensures that there is not totalitarianism emerging from that singular system, and that also is more ecological at its core. As it has several centers, it's more diversified, so it's more resilient. So my idea is to bring the concept of polysingularity in the discourse on singularity. And I'm going to show you how I do that using a set of tools that I developed. And hopefully you can do then the same for your own ideas that you find interesting. So first of all, let's begin from analyzing how it actually works. How do we find information online? 80% of people, that's like real stats, when they search for something, they go on Google, at least in Europe and in the US. So here, the first thing I do is I search for singularity, and I'm going to see top 10 results. And some other statistics shows that 50% of people click on these first three top results. So those three results will see most attention and then much less here. So my first intent is to analyze the search results here and to see what they're talking about. Because If I understand what are the main topics in the existing discourse and I cover them all with the article that I want to create, I will ensure that Google will think that my content is of high quality, it's talking about all the important topics, and so therefore it's going to push it to the top of search results. And here in Infranodus I can do that. I can go to the import app. Here I'm going to show you how that works. Import apps, and then I'm going to go to study market and SEO analysis. SEO stands for search engine optimization, and then I will type in the topic of singularity. Then I click that I want to analyze search results, but here I choose that I want to analyze the content of the extracted pages from the first page, 10 results. Okay, and then once I do that, I will click visualize, and Infranodus will show me a knowledge graph for the top 10 pages that exist on the topic on Google. So it's going to look something like this. I will probably need to remove some technical terms, which I did here, and also the search term itself, singularity, because I want to see the context around it. And here it shows me, all right, so the main topics when you talk about singularity, what you find on Google, they're referring to cognitive surpass, technological evolution, AI scenarios, machine intelligence. Now, this is very important because that already helps me see what are the main topics I should be talking about if I talk about singularity. If I want to reach people who are searching for singularity with my concept of polysingularity, I need to cover all of those topics at the same time. Okay, so it's like this is a map, and these are the islands that I have to visit with my content in order to be sure that Google will consider it to be of high quality. Okay, so this is the first rule. We analyze Google search results, get the main topics, and try to cover them all with our content as well. And we can do it manually, or we can use AI to do that. Now, what I can also do is to apply a filter and visualize what are the top 3 search results talking about. So here I go to filters and I choose rank 1 to 3. So these are the pages at the first 3 positions, and I click highlight, and I can see that actually the top 3 pages are covering the whole graph. So that's another confirmation that if you want to be at the top, you need to be talking about those important topics. By the way, if I ask it to highlight the search results for the pages 4 to 6, so this is basically what you see here when you scroll down, and this is what gets much less clicks, by the way, like maybe 20%, not 50%, split among them 3. I will see that those pages, they're a bit more niche. They're talking about technical software, systems. You see it's kind of like talking more about some programs, applications, so it's much more technical. And this shows me that Google actually prefers to show those more specific pages a little bit lower. That can also be interesting if I don't want to compete with the top 3, because it's going to be quite hard. So that's another insight, that I can focus on something a bit niche and specific, and then I have a chance to get to the top of search results, but I'm not going to be at the very top. All right. And then one last thing is that if we look at the last pages, we will see that they actually once again cover the whole graph. So there is another insight that we can get from it, that it's not only about what you talk about, but also where you talk about that. And one thing that a lot of marketing specialists do, and a lot of specialists in search engine optimization do, is that they know that you should include the important search terms in the section titles, which are usually tagged with H2 in HTML, the language that's used to create web pages. So you need to have titles that mention important terms, because look, if I choose the pages that are at the lower end of the search results that have a tag H2, so that's like the tag which they use to communicate, right? I see that they're talking about technology and technological future in their tags. Now, if I do the same, but I apply this to the first 3 pages, and make sure you also have this one selected here, because then it shows the overlap. So it shows you the pages at the top 3 results with the tag H2. Then we click here. Let me recalculate this actually. So I'm going to choose 1, 3 now, highlight. Now you see they're talking about explosion of intelligence and superintelligence. So actually what's also important here is that if we want to be at the top of search results, we need to focus on more general topics, such as the implications for intelligence, the explosion of intelligence, and superintelligence, and so on. Because we can see here actually that all of those titles, they include those terms, right? Like the future of biotech, the future of intelligence, immortality. So you need to talk about these more kind of universal topics if you want to be at the top of search results. So this is another insight that we can get from this analysis. Focus on those main topics, but also make a specific emphasis on intelligence, human intelligence, superintelligence, and all of those general concepts as well. Okay, so this is the first insight we get. The second insight is that we can analyze the output of AI for the same query. And in order to do that, we can go to Infranodus here, apps, and then brainstorm tab here, and then we type in singularity, and we go to AI generated, and here we choose generate AI knowledge graph. But here we say that we want to analyze the words in the text, 20 statements, give it a name. And what happens here is that Infranodus uses GPT-4 to generate statements on the topic of singularity, and then it visualizes them as a graph. So we sort of get an opportunity to get into the LLM's brain, because we have a simplified representation of what it thinks about when it thinks of singularity. And maybe you already know how AI works, how LLMs work, but basically when they think about a certain term, they have an embedding. It's kind of like a measure of it in a vector form, and it shows us how similar those terms are based on their proximity in the multidimensional space. So what you see here is kind of like a simplified representation of that, a very simplified representation, which is not really based on embeddings, but on co-occurrences, but it's basically how LLM sees this particular text, right? So for example, that means that if you focus, let's say, on the concept of intelligent life, this is what it's going to be connected to for LLM. It's going to be connected to machine, to singularity in the context of discourse and singularity, right? So this representation helps you see how AI sees those concepts together in this context, okay? And that's quite interesting, because then you can also analyze the main topics that it's thinking about when it thinks of singularity. And here, for instance, we see that it's much more focused on ethics. That's usually the bias which they built into those AI systems. They always have to be ethical. So they're still focused on cognitive evolution here, that it's a pivotal moment, on transformative growth, the same way that the Google search results did. But they also talk about ethical frameworks and identity and so on. So it's kind of a bit more ethical, philosophical at its core. And this insight is also interesting because we can integrate it into our text. And if we cover all those topics with our article, then we will be sure that an LLM will think it's a high quality content, and hopefully it's going to quote our concept of polysingularity when it's talking about singularity next time that it produces a response, once it, of course, trained on your data. What we can do now is actually combine the two graphs. So the graph of the content generated by AI with the Google search results. Okay, so I go into compare to, and then I ask it to combine with the Google search result page. Then I click visualize. And what's going to happen is that Infranodus will represent them both at the same time. You will need to clean it a little bit also, because sometimes it extracts some technical information about cookies and privacy statements that you have on the website. So here's actually this cluster here. You see it's on the periphery and it's a little bit outside of the main discourse because it's not really related. So I can click delete here, and then it's going to be much more precise. And here it generates for me the topics that apply to both graphs. Actually, here we can see perspective, Google Pages, singularity merged with AI topics on singularity. Okay, so now we have a combination of all of them. And now we have the main topics that are generated both based on Google search results and on AI content. And if we create content that will touch upon all of those topics at the same time, then both Google and LLM will think that we're touching on something important because we're talking about all of them at the same time. So it's going to be rated as high quality content. There are, of course, other tricks as well, but this is kind of like an important beginning, right? And then here we click summarize. It's going to generate a summary for each of those topics. And then we can read it. So here it's technological singularity, human intelligence, this one, ethics, speed improvement, irreversible growth, superintelligence takeoff. So we can copy all of those topics. Then we can go to Gemini, create a new chat and ask it, write an article on singularity, also talking about the concept of polysingularity. You can take some content from polysingularity timecodes.com, that's my website. And make sure you include these topics in it. Also make it SEO friendly. If you write SEO friendly, it means search engine optimization friendly. That's basically a term you can use to ensure that it uses the right words in the titles and so on. These are the topics. And one last thing I want to show is that you can also identify the gap in the discourse, because if you want to make a meaningful contribution to this discourse, it's not just about covering the main topics. You also need to identify the gaps and to bridge them in an interesting way. So for example, here we can highlight the gap between superintelligence takeoff and machine intelligence. And we can ask the system to focus on this gap a little bit more. So we can copy this topic here, can go to Gemini and also ask it at the top. Also, so we can write topics here and then also bridge these gaps. Computational science and superintelligence takeoff, machine intelligence and intelligence takeoff, global risk. And then let's generate some more. So show another gap, reversible growth, superintelligence takeoff, irreversible growth. So this is the gap that we're focusing on now. Global risk also and superintelligence takeoff. So I will also add global risk. We have it here. And then let's see if there is any other gaps which we can focus on. Maybe also speed improvement. Okay, so and AI ethics, actually, that's quite interesting as well. So let's also add those ones. Okay, so once we add them, Gemini AI will try to generate an article that will be focused on the concept of singularity here, but talking about polysingular future. So introducing the concept of polysingularity, then it will talk about those concepts, and then you can ask it to generate a prompt, which you can then use to generate the final article. So it's kind of, it's going to make an outline first, and then you can generate a prompt based on this outline and then use the outline to generate the final article. So this would be the workflow. I actually described it in more detail in the article that I'm going to link to from this video, because it works best in a few iterations. But what you're going to get in the end is going to be a text, which you can then copy into Infranodus. I actually have it already here, I think. And then you can actually check how well it fits into the existing discourse. So you can go to compare to, and then you choose embeds, and then you ask it to show how well it embeds into Google search results. And it's going to highlight with the red. So this image I showed you first, it's that. It's going to highlight how well this discourse fits into the Google search results and what's missing. So if you go on content gaps, you will see that, for instance, it's missing these ideas of a problem, global problem, factor. So you can actually go back to Gemini and ask it to add more ideas on global problems and what else do we miss here, and implications of this. Okay, so then it's going to make another iteration, write another article, and you can actually do it in a few approaches. And by the way, you don't need to use the AI, you can also write it yourself. I actually write usually myself, but I'm just showing you how you can use AI because it's just faster to demonstrate it this way. And once you generate something that looks like a final result that you're happy with, you can publish it online and then wait for Google to index it in its search results. And once it indexes it, using Google Search Console, you will be able to see what are the search terms that people use to find this content. And usually if you target those search terms, then you can increase your position higher and higher using the same approach. So it's not going to be that you write this article and it's going to be at the top of Google, but that's a very good first step. You cover all the important topics that Google thinks relates to this idea. Then you focus on the gaps that it identifies also, so you can contribute something meaningful and interesting through bridging those gaps. Then in a few iterations, you generate an article, you publish it online, you get some feedback, develop it further. And then finally, you have your idea of polysingularity integrated in the discourse on singularity, or whatever is the topic you're interested in. And of course, now that you know how it works, you can also maybe notice much better how also others do it to you as well, you know, with their brands, their political ideas, or with some esoteric ideas like mine. I hope you find it interesting. Please let me know what you think in the comments to the video, and also read the full article in the description, because this video is just a quick demonstration. But if you want to see how it works step by step and the prompts that you can use, you can just read the article, and I provide all the details there. Thank you.